A sterile millionaire bought a boy from a poor family. The next day, the millionaire fainted. In the bitter cold of a winter morning, James Rivera stood frozen at his window, watching a small boy cleaning the glass of a neighboring house. The child's thin arms trembled as he scrubbed, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. What caught James's attention wasn't the boy's tattered clothes or the bruises visible on his skin. It was the butterfly-shaped birthmark peeking out from his rolled-up sleeve. The same mark that had been etched in James's memory for 8 years, since the day his newborn son vanished from the hospital maternity ward. Before we dive into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. If this is your first time discovering the channel or you haven't subscribed yet, please support us by clicking the subscribe button. It truly means a lot to us. Thank you so much. James Rivera wasn't always the man who haunted the streets at night searching for a ghost. 8 years ago, he had been different, successful, respected, and deeply in love with his wife Luna. Their spacious mansion, once filled with Luna's piano music and laughter, now stood as a hollow reminder of everything he had lost. The community whispered about him, the millionaire who'd lost his mind after tragedy struck. They saw his nightly walks, noticed how he'd stopped to stare at children in the park, and drew their own conclusions. Some called him dangerous, others pitied him. None understood the truth that consumed him somewhere out there. His son was alive. The day everything changed remained seared in his memory. Luna had just given birth to their beautiful boy, a perfect child with a distinctive butterfly birthmark on his arm. Look, Luna had whispered weakly, tracing the mark with her finger, "He's got wings to fly." Those were her last conscious words before complications set in, sending her into a coma that would steal her away to a psychiatric facility where she remained lost in her own world. But it was what happened next that truly destroyed James. During the chaos of trying to save Luna, their newborn son vanished. The hospital cameras mysteriously malfunctioned. The nurse on duty disappeared. When James finally gathered himself enough to report the kidnapping, the police treated him with thinly veiled skepticism. "Mr. Rivera," they'd said, examining his wild eyes and disheveled appearance, "are you certain there was a baby? Your wife's medical records show severe complications. Sometimes in traumatic situations our minds create." He hadn't let them finish. He'd stormed out, clutching the only proof. He had a single photograph showing the butterfly birthmark. The investigation was cursory at best. They blamed his wealth, suggesting he'd imagined a child to cope with Luna's condition. The detective had even recommended psychiatric help. "Grief makes us see things that aren't there," he'd said kindly, closing the case file. Years passed and James poured his resources into private investigations, each leading nowhere. His business thrived, but he lived like a ghost in his own life. The garden Luna had loved withered. The piano gathered dust. His only companion was Maria, the elderly housekeeper who had known Luna since childhood and refused to leave, even as James's reputation crumbled. The wealthy neighbors who once sought his company now crossed the street to avoid him. Parents pulled their children closer when he passed. The local school board had even sent a polite but firm letter requesting he stop loitering near the playground. They couldn't understand that every child's laugh, every small boy's face, might be the one he'd lost. Mr. James, Maria would say, setting down his untouched dinner, "Your son wouldn't want you to live like this, but how could he live any other way?" The butterfly birthmark was his anchor to reality, proof that he wasn't crazy, that somewhere out there was a boy who needed him. His own sister had tried to intervene last year, suggesting he move on and consider remarrying. He'd shown her the door and hadn't spoken to her since. How could he explain that moving on meant abandoning his child to whatever fate had befallen him? That every night he lay awake wondering if his son was safe, loved, or even alive. The police file gathered dust in the precinct archives, his son's disappearance reduced to a few pages of speculation about a grieving father's delusions. But James knew the truth. He kept it in a locked drawer, Luna's journal, found weeks after her breakdown, with its cryptic final entry they're watching. They want him. James, if you read this, don't stop looking. Our butterfly needs his wings. Now, standing at his window on this bitter winter morning, staring at a small boy with a familiar mark, James felt 8 years of pain and search crystallize into a single moment of clarity. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't delusional. That butterfly birthmark was like a beacon, cutting through years of doubt and ridicule, leading him to what he'd lost. But as he watched the boy scrub windows with trembling hands, James realized the real battle was just beginning. How could he prove anything? Who would believe him now after years of being dismissed as the neighborhood's tragic figure? And most importantly, how could he protect this child when his own reputation might be the biggest obstacle to overcome? The answer, he knew, would cost him everything. But for the first time in 8 years, James Rivera felt truly alive. His son was no longer a ghost, he was flesh and blood, suffering right before his eyes. And this time, no one would stop him from bringing his butterfly home. Henry learned early that silence was safer than screaming. In the dim light of dawn, while Ryan and Scarlett still slept, he would slip from his threadbare mattress in the basement and begin his daily routine. Clean, stay quiet, make yourself invisible. These weren't just rules, they were survival. The neighborhood knew him as that troublemaker kid, the one who supposedly stole from gardens and broke windows. Ryan and Scarlett had crafted this reputation carefully, ensuring that any bruises or marks on Henry would be dismissed as deserved punishment for a delinquent child. Nobody questioned why an 8-year-old was always cleaning, or why he wore long sleeves even in summer heat. His small hands, cracked and raw from harsh cleaning chemicals, moved mechanically across surfaces that would never be clean enough for his tormentors. The butterfly birthmark on his arm, the source of Scarlett's particular hatred, remained carefully hidden. Cover that ugly thing, she would snarl, striking him if it ever showed. It's a mark of shame. But in rare moments alone, Henry would trace the butterfly's shape and imagine it gave him strength. Sometimes, when exhaustion and hunger made him dizzy, he could almost hear music's soft piano notes that felt like memories but couldn't be. Ryan and Scarlett had told him he was bought cheap, that his real parents hadn't wanted him. Yet the music persisted like a lullaby from another life. School was both escape and torment. Teachers noted his intelligence but complained about his attitude when he fell asleep in class, exhausted from pre-dawn cleaning. Classmates avoided him, warned by their parents about the thief. The school counselor had once noticed his bruises, but Ryan and Scarlett convinced everyone Henry was troubled and prone to self-harm. Only in music class did Henry feel truly alive. Though he'd never touched a piano before, his fingers seemed to know where to go. The first time he played, the music teacher had stared in amazement. But when she tried to enroll him in the school band, Scarlett had arrived in a fury, dragging Henry home and banning him from music forever. "You're nothing special," she'd hissed. "You're lucky we even keep you." The basement became his sanctuary and prison. In the darkest hours, he would hum quietly to himself, creating melodies that felt like fragments of dreams. Sometimes he imagined a woman's voice singing with him, though he knew that was impossible. Nobody had ever sung to him. His small world was defined by rules: never look people in the eye, never show the mark, never complain about hunger or cold, never cry where they can see you, never trust anyone who offers help. They always believe Ryan and Scarlett in the end. The neighbors watched him clean windows, rake leaves and shovel snow, but they saw what they wanted to see: a troubled child being disciplined by strict guardians. When Mrs. Peterson's jewelry went missing, they blamed Henry, though he'd seen Ryan pocket it during a maintenance call. When the Andersons' car was vandalized, suspicious eyes turned to him, despite his being locked in the basement that night. Henry learned to make himself small, to fold his hopes into tight corners where they couldn't be found and crushed. But sometimes when he caught his reflection in the windows he cleaned, He saw something else, a shadow of someone he might have been. In those moments, the butterfly mark seemed to tingle, as if trying to tell him a story he couldn't quite remember. His only possession was a small notebook hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the basement. In it, he drew endless butterflies, each one a silent rebellion against Scarlett's hatred of his mark. He didn't understand why this simple birthmark enraged her so much, but somehow it felt like a connection to something greater than his confined existence. The local librarian, before being warned away by Ryan, had once told Henry that butterflies symbolized transformation. He clung to this idea during the worst nights, when pain or hunger kept him awake. Maybe someday he too would transform, spread hidden wings, and fly away from this place. But for now, he remained trapped in an endless cycle of cleaning and punishment, his existence reduced to the space between other people's cruelty and indifference. The music in his head was his only companion, the butterfly mark his only link to a past he couldn't remember but somehow knew existed. And so he cleaned, day after day, watching the world through windows that reflected back only what others chose to see, never the truth of who he really was, or the wings he kept hidden beneath threads of fear and silence. Luna Rivera existed in a world of fragments. In the pristine halls of Evergreen Psychiatric Facility, she drifted between reality and memory, her once brilliant mind shattered by trauma. The staff knew her as the pianist. Even in her deepest fog, her fingers would move as if playing invisible keys, creating melodies only she could hear. Her room, unlike the sterile hospital environment, bloomed with painted butterflies. Every surface bore her artwork, delicate wings in various shades of blue, each an echo of the mark she'd seen on her baby boy before everything went dark. The doctors called it an obsession, she called it remembering. She's an interesting case, they'd tell medical students. Post-traumatic psychosis following childbirth complications, but none of them knew about the nurse who'd whispered threats, the hands that had taken her child, or the choice she'd made to save him. In her lucid moments, Luna would write in journals they never read, documenting truths disguised as delusions. But across the city, Sarah Matthews built her life around saving others, never knowing she was searching for herself. At 28, she'd become the youngest director of the Child Trafficking Prevention Unit, driven by inexplicable nightmares of being separated from someone she couldn't quite remember. The butterfly tattoo on her arm, identical to her recurring dreams, served as her personal mission statement. Sarah's adopted parents had never told her about her twin, believing the hospital's story about a single surviving child. They'd given her everything: love, education, opportunity, but couldn't fill the hollow space she felt. Every rescued child brought her closer to something she couldn't name, a shadow of connection just beyond her reach. In the Rivera mansion, Maria Garcia carried the weight of secrets like rosary beads, counting them in silent prayers. For 30 years, she'd served the family, watching Luna grow from a gifted music student into the radiant woman who married James. She'd been there the night everything changed, had seen what others hadn't, but fear kept her silent. The neighborhood itself held its own stories. Behind manicured lawns and elegant facades, whispers circulated about James Rivera's madness, Henry's supposed crimes, and the strange music that sometimes echoed from Luna's abandoned piano room. Even the local police department kept a special file on James, marking him as emotionally unstable but harmless. Ryan and Scarlett's house stood like a shadow at the edge of this pristine world. Its peeling paint and overgrown yard marked them as outsiders, but their practiced smiles and careful explanations about their troubled adopted son kept questions at bay. Few noticed how Scarlett flinched at the sight of butterflies, or how Ryan's eyes followed wealthy families with calculating interest. The community's children created their own legends. They dared each other to run past the Rivera mansion, claiming the crazy millionaire kidnapped kids who looked like his lost son. They avoided Henry on the playground, spreading stories about stolen lunches and mysterious accidents. None recognized the irony of fearing the wrong people. At Evergreen, Luna's doctors noted her sudden interest in newspaper articles about missing children, projection they wrote in her file, missing the pattern she was piecing together. Her latest journal filled with coded messages about butterfly wings and broken mirrors, each page a breadcrumb trail leading to truth. Sarah's office walls displayed photos of rescued children, including one of a recent operation that had nearly broken her. Something about the boy's eyes had seemed familiar, but he'd disappeared before she could learn more. The butterfly birthmark on his arm had haunted her dreams for weeks after. Maria watched it all unfold from her quiet corner of the Rivera house, dusting Luna's piano and tending the garden that refused to die. She alone knew why Scarlett had once been a nurse at the maternity ward, why Ryan's face seemed familiar in old family photos, and why the butterfly birthmark meant so much more than anyone realized. The truth lay scattered like puzzle pieces across their lives in Luna's paintings, Sarah's cases, Maria's memories, and Henry's music. Each person held a fragment of a story too dangerous to tell, yet too important to forget. And through it all, the butterfly mark appeared again and again on Henry's arm as he cleaned endless windows, in Luna's artwork covering hospital walls, in Sarah's tattoo as she rescued another child, and in Maria's nightmares as she relived the night she'd chosen silence over justice. The stage was set, the players in position, each unaware of how closely their lives were about to intertwine. As winter settled over the city, fate prepared to unleash a storm that would either heal these broken pieces or shatter them forever. The morning James discovered Henry wasn't like his usual vigils. Snow had fallen overnight, turning the neighborhood into a pristine canvas that emphasized the boy's isolation. Through swirling flakes, James watched Henry struggle with a heavy bucket, his thin arms trembling as he dipped a cloth in icy water to clean already spotless windows. Something about the boy's methodical movements caught James's attention. Unlike the frantic energy of children rushing to finish chores, Henry worked with the resigned precision of someone who knew perfection would never be enough. His breaths came in visible puffs, his lips blue from cold, yet he continued without pause. Maria, James called, not taking his eyes from the window. "Have you seen that child before?" The housekeeper appeared beside him, her sharp intake of breath telling him she had. "Si, senor." "That's the boy they call Trouble. The one who lives with those people, Ryan and Scarlett." Her voice carried an edge he'd never heard before. As they watched, a gust of wind caught Henry's sleeve, pushing it up just enough to reveal what lay beneath. James's world tilted on its axis. There, clearly visible against the boy's pale skin, was a butterfly-shaped birthmark identical to the one in the photograph he'd carried for 8 years. "Dios mío," Maria whispered, crossing herself. But James was already moving, grabbing his coat with trembling hands. "Old Dr. Peterson," he instructed, noting how Henry's movements had grown increasingly unsteady. "Tell him to come immediately." The boy's face, what he could see of it, showed the flush of fever against unhealthy pallor. Outside, the cold hit him like a physical force. Henry didn't notice his approach, too focused on his task and staying upright. Up close, James could see how the boy's clothes hung on his frame, how his shoes were held together with tape, how old bruises peeked out from under his collar. "You shouldn't be out here," James said softly, trying not to startle him. "You're sick." Henry's reaction was instantaneous and heartbreaking. He flinched violently, the cleaning cloth falling from his grip as he pressed himself against the wall. His eyes, glassy with fever, darted between James and the house behind him. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice hoarse. "I'll clean faster. Please don't tell them I dropped the cloth." The fear in his voice made James's chest ache. Slowly telegraphing his movements, he removed his coat. "You're burning up with fever, child. Let me help you." But Henry was already shaking his head, panic rising in his eyes. "They'll be angry. I have to finish. I'm not allowed to stop." As if summoned by his words, a sharp voice cut through the snow-muffled morning. Henry Scarlett appeared on the porch, her face twisting when she saw James. What do you think you're doing with our boy?" Ryan materialized beside her, his casual stance belied by the tension in his shoulders. "Mr. Rivera, isn't it? The one who's always watching children." The implied threat in his tone was clear. James ignored them, focusing on Henry, who had begun to sway dangerously. "This child needs medical attention," he stated firmly. "He has a dangerous fever." "Our son is fine," Scarlett snapped, descending the steps. "He's just trying to get attention. Aren't you, Henry?" But Henry couldn't answer. His eyes rolled back, knees buckling as the fever finally overcame him. James lunged forward, catching him before he hit the frozen ground. The boy's skin burned against his hands, and up close, the butterfly birthmark was unmistakable. "Get your hands off him," Ryan growled, advancing. "Or we'll call the police about the neighborhood's famous child-obsessed millionaire." James stood, lifting Henry's unconscious form too easily. "Go ahead," he challenged, his voice deadly quiet. "Call them. I'm sure they'd be very interested in why an 8-year-old is cleaning windows with a dangerous fever, or why he has bruises under his clothes. Or perhaps," he added, watching their faces carefully, "they'd like to know about that distinctive birthmark." Something flickered in Scarlett's eyes: recognition, fear, calculation. She exchanged a quick look with Ryan before forcing a concerned smile. "We're only trying to protect him," she said, her tone completely transformed. "From himself, you understand. He's troubled." But James was already turning away, Henry cradled against his chest. "Dr. Peterson is on his way. You're welcome to follow us to the house, or shall I have my lawyer contact you instead?" He didn't wait for their response, focusing instead on the butterfly birthmark that had haunted his dreams for 8 years. After so long searching, his son was in his arms, burning with fever, abused and terrified, but alive. The real battle, he knew, was just beginning. Behind him, he heard Ryan's low voice call them. "Tell them it's time." He found the boy. Inside the Rivera mansion, Dr. Peterson's face grew increasingly grave as he examined Henry. The boy lay semi-conscious on Luna's old bed, his small frame dwarfed by the elegant surroundings. Each new discovery painted a darker picture: malnutrition, untreated infections, evidence of long-term abuse. "This is criminal neglect," James the doctor muttered, documenting another set of suspicious marks. "He needs hospitalization immediately." Before James could respond, police sirens pierced the morning quiet. Through the window, he watched 3 patrol cars arrive, followed by a social services vehicle. Ryan and Scarlett emerged from one car, their faces masks of concerned parenthood. "Mr. Rivera," Officer Collins called through the door, "we need you to send out the child. Now." James felt his heart freeze. He knew Collins, the same officer who dismissed his reports about his missing son years ago. "He needs medical attention," he shouted back. "Dr. Peterson is treating him." "Sir, we have reports of you forcibly removing a minor from his legal guardians. Don't make this worse for yourself." Maria appeared at James's elbow, her face tight with worry. "Senor, the neighbors are gathering. They're saying things, terrible things about you and the boy." Through the growing crowd, James spotted Mrs. Anderson gesturing animatedly to a reporter. Always knew there was something wrong with him, watching children like that. Poor Henry, he must have been so scared. The doctor cleared his throat. "James, if you don't let them in, they'll force their way through. I can testify about the boy's condition, but we need to do this legally." Henry stirred on the bed, his fever-bright eyes focusing briefly. "Please," he whispered, "don't let them take me back." His hand clutched weakly at James's sleeve, the butterfly birthmark stark against his pale skin. "Mr. Rivera, this is your final warning." James felt trapped in a nightmare. Outside, Ryan and Scarlett were playing their parts perfectly, the concerned guardians, tearfully explaining to social services about their troubled adopted son and the unstable millionaire who'd taken him. "Think about what you're doing," Dr. Peterson urged. "If you resist, you'll lose any chance of helping him legally." The door shuddered under heavy knocks. Henry's grip tightened fractionally, tears slipping from his closed eyes. "They'll hurt me worse now," he breathed, so quietly James almost missed it. Maria suddenly straightened, decision flashing across her face. "The music room," she said urgently. "Take him there. I'll handle this." Before James could question her, she was moving, her usual quiet efficiency transformed into dramatic hysteria. She flung open the door, wailing in Spanish, effectively blocking the entrance while creating confusion. James didn't waste the opportunity. He scooped up Henry, who weighed no more than a shadow, and slipped through the hidden door that connected to Luna's music room. The space had remained untouched since her breakdown, sheet music still scattered across the piano. Through the wall, he heard Maria's performance reaching new heights. "Ay, Dios mío, the poor señor, he is not well today. The memories of his lost son, you understand. But there is no boy here, search if you must." Henry's breathing had grown more labored, his skin radiating dangerous heat. James laid him gently on the piano bench, surrounded by Luna's last compositions, all pieces about butterflies and lost wings. "Stay with me, son," he whispered, pressing a cool cloth to Henry's forehead. "I won't let them hurt you again." The boy's eyes fluttered open, focusing hazily on the piano. His hand reached out, trembling fingers brushing the keys in a sequence that made James's heart stop. It was Luna's lullaby, the one she'd composed while pregnant, that she'd hummed in the hospital before everything went wrong. Outside, the search was underway. Footsteps thundered through the house, doors banging open and closed. James could hear Ryan's voice, dripping with false concern, his clearly delusional officer, projecting his lost son onto our Henry. Dr. Peterson's authoritative tones cut through the chaos. "I must insist on accompanying any search. The boy needs immediate medical attention, regardless of custody issues." Henry's fingers continued their ghost dance across the keys, barely touching them, yet the melody was unmistakable. His fever-glazed eyes held a spark of something: recognition, memory, or delirium. James couldn't tell. "How do you know that song?" James whispered. But Henry was fading again, his hand dropping limply. The butterfly birthmark seemed to pulse in the dim light, a silent testimony to truths yet unrevealed. The footsteps were getting closer. Soon they would think to check the music room. James gathered his son close, feeling the heat of fever through thin clothes, and made a decision that would change everything. "Maria," he called softly, knowing she would hear. "Plan B." Through the wall, he heard her quiet response: "Si, Señor, God forgive us all." The crisis exploded without warning. One moment, Henry was being rushed through hospital doors. The next, his body convulsed violently on the gurney, his fever reaching catastrophic levels. James watched in horror as his son's small frame arched off the bed, medical teams swarming around him like a choreographed nightmare. Temperature 105.8. Multiple organ systems compromised. Starting crash protocol. "We're losing him." The butterfly birthmark on Henry's arm seemed to pulse with each erratic heartbeat, a desperate signal of life growing fainter by the second. Ryan and Scarlett maintained their performance in the corridor, but their eyes betrayed a calculating fear as doctors questioned the boy's extensive injuries and suspicious medical history. "Sir, you need to step back," a nurse urged James, but he couldn't move. 8 years of searching, only to watch his son slip away again. The universe couldn't be that cruel. Henry's eyes fluttered open briefly, fever-glazed but suddenly lucid. The piano, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Mom used to play. Butterflies dancing, then his eyes rolled back, body going rigid as alarms screamed to life. Code Blue. Pediatric Code Blue. The words hit James like physical blows. Through the chaos, he heard Scarlett's sharp intake of breath. She clutched Ryan's arm, her careful facade cracking. He remembers she hissed. How can he remember her? The medical team worked frantically, their movements precise despite the urgency. Each compression on Henry's chest felt like it was breaking something in James's soul. The boy's skin had taken on a bluish tinge, his lips colorless, the butterfly birthmark standing out in stark relief against his pallid arm. "Come on, butterfly," James whispered, echoing Luna's words from 8 years ago. "Fight, please fight." Dr. Peterson arrived, taking in the scene with professional gravity. Full history, now he demanded of Ryan and Scarlett. Every detail matters. But Scarlett's composure was crumbling. We got him when he was small, she stumbled. The papers. There was a fire. Lying won't help him now, Dr. Peterson cut in sharply. This level of systemic infection suggests prolonged neglect. His blood work shows malnutrition. His X-rays reveal old fractures. Start telling the truth or I'm calling the police. Ryan's face darkened. You can't prove anything. We are his legal guardians. Legal through what channels? James challenged, his voice dangerous. Show us the adoption papers. Show us anything that gives you the right to destroy my son's life. The word son hung in the air like a thunderclap. In Henry's room, the alarms reached a new pitch of urgency. He's crashing. No pulse. Starting compressions. Get the crash cart in here now. James pressed against the window, watching them fight for his son's life. Each compression seemed to push Henry further away, each shock from the defibrillator lifting his tiny body like broken wings, trying to take flight. Through his tears, he saw something that stopped his heart. Henry's hand, limp against the white hospital sheets, had fallen palm up. There, in the harsh hospital lights, the butterfly birthmark seemed to change. What he'd thought was a simple shape revealed itself as something more: tiny musical notes hidden in the pattern of the wings. Just like the ones Luna used to draw. That's impossible, Scarlett breathed, seeing it too. We covered it up for years. How? But James wasn't listening. Memory crashed over him. Luna in the hospital, singing their special lullaby while tracing butterfly notes on their newborn's arm. Not just notes she'd whispered before the darkness took her. A message: keep him safe. In Henry's room, the doctors were reaching the critical moment. His heart had been stopped for dangerously long. Last attempt, the head doctor announced, charging the defibrillator one final time. James pressed his forehead against the glass. Luna, he whispered, help him remember how to fly. As if in answer, a strange sound cut through the medical chaos. Henry's fingers, though he was clinically dead, twitched against the sheet, tapping out a sequence. A nurse gasped. It was a melody, the same one James had heard in his dreams for 8 years. Luna's lullaby. Clear. The shock lifted Henry one last time. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then, we have rhythm, pulse returning, pressure stabilizing. James sagged against the window, tears flowing freely. Behind him, he heard running footsteps, Ryan and Scarlett making their escape. But it didn't matter. What mattered was the soft, steady beeping of Henry's heart monitor, each pulse like a butterfly's wing beat, carrying hope. Maria appeared silently at his side, pressing a worn journal into his hands. From Luna, she whispered, "It's time you knew everything." If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support enables us to continue sharing powerful stories of hope, family, and redemption. Each subscription helps us reach more people with meaningful narratives that inspire and move hearts. Thank you for being part of our storytelling journey. In the sterile quiet of the pediatric ECU, Henry's recovery seemed as fragile as a butterfly's wing. Each breath was monitored, each heartbeat tracked. While James kept vigil in an uncomfortable chair, Luna's journal unopened in his lap. He couldn't bring himself to read it, yet the present moment was overwhelming enough. DNA results are back, Mr. Rivera. Dr. Peterson's voice was soft, but carried clearly. The doctor closed the door behind him, his expression unreadable as he held out a sealed envelope. You might want to sit down for this. James's hands trembled as he took the envelope. 8 years of searching, of being called delusional, of empty leads and crushed hopes, all coming down to this moment. Whatever it says, he managed. I'm not leaving him. Open it, Dr. Peterson encouraged gently. Henry needs to know who he is. The paper crackled as James broke the seal. His eyes scanned the medical jargon until they found what mattered: probability of paternity 99.999999%. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Scientific confirmation of what his heart had known since seeing that butterfly birthmark. Henry was his son. His lost butterfly had finally come home. There's more, Dr. Peterson added, his tone careful. We found something unusual in the genetic markers. They suggest the presence of an identical twin. James looked up sharply. Luna always said there were 2 heartbeats. The doctors dismissed her as confused from the complications, but she insisted. A small sound from the bed interrupted them. Henry's eyes fluttered open, clearer now that the fever had broken. His gaze found James immediately, a mixture of hope and fear in their depths. You're still here, he whispered, voice rough from the breathing tube they'd recently removed. James moved to the bedside, gently taking Henry's hand, the one with the butterfly birthmark. I'll always be here. The word felt both foreign and perfectly natural on his tongue. I have something to tell you, if you're strong enough to hear it. Henry's fingers tightened slightly around his. About the butterfly? Scarlett always said it was ugly, but he hesitated, then continued in a rush. Sometimes I dream about someone drawing it, making it out of music notes. But that's crazy, right? James felt tears prick his eyes. No, butterfly, that's not crazy at all. Your mother, your real mother, she used to compose music. She drew those notes on your arm the day you were born, turned them into a birthmark so you'd always carry her melody with you. Why? Real mother, Henry's voice quavered. But they said nobody wanted me, that I was bought. They lied, James said firmly, showing Henry the DNA results. You were stolen, not sold. I've been searching for you for 8 years. Your mother, she knew something was wrong. She tried to protect you, but... Is she? Henry couldn't finish the question. She's alive, James assured him quickly, but she's been sick, lost in her own world since losing you. Maybe now, with you found, he let the hope hang in the air between them. Henry processed this, his free hand unconsciously tracing the butterfly mark. Sometimes when I was locked in the basement, I'd hear piano music. I thought I was imagining it, but I could play it perfectly the one time I touched a piano. They got so angry. That was your mother's lullaby, James explained softly. She composed it before you were born. You remembered, even if you didn't know you were remembering. Tears slipped down Henry's cheeks. I have a real family, people who wanted me. Who loved you, James corrected gently. Who never stopped loving you or looking for you. And he added, watching Henry carefully, you might have a twin sister out there too. Henry's eyes widened. A sister. Before James could respond, Maria burst into the room, her usual composure shattered. Senior James, quick turn on the news. Dr. Peterson grabbed the remote, flipping to a local channel. The headline made James's blood run cold. Breaking: major child trafficking ring uncovered missing Rivera twin connected to dozens of cases. The reporter's voice filled the room. Led by Sarah Matthews, director of the Child Trafficking Prevention Unit, the investigation has revealed a systematic network of infant trafficking dating back 8 years. Matthews herself has just discovered she may be one of the victims. The camera cut to a familiar face, a young woman with James's eyes and Luna's determination, speaking at a press conference. And there, visible on her arm as she gestured, was a butterfly birthmark identical to Henry's. "That's Henry," whispered, gripping James's hand tighter. "Your sister James confirmed, watching his daughter speak on screen. She's been fighting to find you all along, without even knowing it." In his pocket, Luna's journal seemed to pulse with untold secrets. The truth was finally emerging, like a butterfly breaking free of its chrysalis. The hospital corridor became a battleground of lawyers, social workers, and police investigators. News of the trafficking ring had exploded across media channels, turning Henry's quiet recovery room into the epicenter of a storm. James stood like a shield between his son and the chaos, while Sarah's investigation sent shockwaves through the community. "We need to question the boy," Detective Marshall insisted, not for the first time. "He's key to understanding how deep this goes." "He's recovering from near death," James countered. "And his name is Henry." The social worker, MS. Chen, intervened diplomatically. "Perhaps we could compromise." Brief questions with both his father and a child psychologist present. The word father still sent ripples of emotion through James. After 8 years of being dismissed as delusional, the DNA results had transformed him from neighborhood pariah to sympathetic figure overnight. The same neighbors who'd whispered about his obsession now left cards and flowers, their guilt wrapped in cellophane and ribbons. "There's something you need to see first," Maria announced, entering with Luna's journal and a stack of old hospital records. Her hands trembled slightly as she laid them out. "I should have shown these years ago, but they threatened Luna." The detective's eyes sharpened. "They threatened your wife, Mr. Rivera?" Ex-nurse Scarlett visited Luna regularly at Evergreen, Maria explained, her voice heavy with old fear. She would whisper things, terrible things. Luna's episodes always got worse after these visits. James felt ice in his veins. They were keeping her unstable on purpose. Maria nodded, opening Luna's journal to a marked page. The handwriting was erratic but clear. "They take the babies when mothers can't fight back." Make her seem crazy. "But I remember 2 butterflies, 2 songs. My twins carry the melody." The social worker gasped softly. "The birthmarks aren't random." Luna knew they were targeting her babies, James realized. She encoded their music into birthmarks so they could be identified. But why didn't she tell me? Because of this, Maria pulled out an old threat letter. They said they would kill the children if she spoke up, so she left clues instead in her art, her music, even on their skin. A commotion outside interrupted them. Sarah Matthews had arrived, her presence electric. She paused in the doorway, seeing Henry asleep in his hospital bed. The matching butterfly birthmarks hers, and his seemed to pulse in recognition. "I've been hunting these people for years," she said softly, never knowing I was looking for my own story. "We've identified 47 cases so far, all following the same pattern." Detective Marshall flipped through his notes. Targeting mothers with difficult pregnancies or mental health challenges, making them seem unstable so their claims wouldn't be believed. But why the elaborate system with the birthmarks? Because Luna wasn't their first victim, Sarah explained. She was the first one who fought back. After her, they changed their methods. No more twins, no more distinctive markings. She touched her own butterfly absently. "We were their last mistake." A lawyer from the district attorney's office arrived, carrying more files. Ryan and Scarlett's apartment was empty, but we found records. Decades of trafficking, hundreds of children. They were just low-level operators in a much larger network. "And the network is still active," Sarah added grimly. "We've tracked similar cases across 5 states. Each time, vulnerable mothers, discredited claims, children sold to the highest bidder." Henry stirred in his sleep, whimpering. James moved instantly to his side, humming Luna's lullaby. The boy settled, his fingers finding his father's hand. The custody hearing is tomorrow, Ms. Chen reminded them gently. Given the circumstances. Given the circumstances, the DA's lawyer interrupted. We need to move quickly. They'll try to silence him, just like they did with Luna. Sarah's expression hardened. Not this time. I'm assigning protection detail. No one touches my brother again. The word brother hung in the air, new and powerful. James watched his children, one protecting, one healing, and felt Luna's presence strongly. She'd known this day would come, had encoded the truth into butterfly wings and music notes, waiting for the moment when her family could fly free. There's something else, Maria said quietly, pulling out one final document. I found this in Luna's old sheet music. It's a list of names, other mothers, other babies, and addresses for what she called the Butterfly Gardens. Detective Marshall's eyes widened. The trafficking safe houses, she mapped the entire network. My wife, James said softly, pride mixing with pain, was never crazy. She was leaving us a trail of breadcrumbs, protecting our children the only way she could. And now Sarah declared, her mother's determination shining in her eyes, we're going to finish what she started. But first she moved to Henry's bedside, touching his butterfly mark gently. First we make sure our family is safe. The battle lines were drawn. In his sleep, Henry smiled, as if feeling the protective wings of justice finally spreading over him. The revelations came like dominoes falling, each truth exposing another. In Henry's hospital room, Maria finally shared the burden she'd carried for 8 years, her voice trembling as she unfolded the past. Ryan isn't just any trafficker, she began, clutching Luna's journal. He's Luna's half-brother. Your wife never knew she was raised by her mother after their father abandoned them. But Ryan knew. He watched her whole life, waiting. James felt the world tilt beneath him. Her own brother sold her children. Worse, Maria continued, tears flowing freely now. He orchestrated everything. The complicated pregnancy, the medical emergencies, even Luna's breakdown. Scarlett was already working in the maternity ward when Luna went into labor. Sarah, standing protectively near Henry's bed, inhaled sharply. That's why they chose her? Because she was family. They chose her because she was a musician, Maria corrected. The butterfly birthmarks weren't just identification, they were music. Luna encoded a specific melody into each mark, something only a mother with perfect pitch could create. She knew if her children were separated, the music would lead them back together. Henry stirred in his sleep, his fingers twitching as if playing phantom piano keys. The butterfly on his arm seemed to dance in the hospital lights. But why, James demanded. Why go to such lengths? Maria's next words fell like stones into still water because Luna wasn't their first target. She was their revenge. She pulled out an old photograph, yellow with age. A young woman sat at a piano, a butterfly pendant at her throat. This was Ryan and Luna's mother. She ran an underground network helping trafficked children escape. She used music to communicate with the kids, specific melodies that meant safety, danger, escape routes. Ryan never forgave her for choosing stolen children over him. So he turned her own methods against her daughter, Sarah whispered, horrified. Used music as a weapon instead of salvation. Luna figured it out too late, Maria continued. The day she gave birth, she recognized Ryan despite his disguise. She tried to warn the nurses, but Scarlett had already switched her medication. Nobody believed her delusions about her brother stealing her babies. James remembered that day with devastating clarity, Luna's desperate attempts to communicate, the doctors dismissing her fears as paranoia, his own helplessness as she slipped away into a medicated haze. She left clues everywhere, Maria said, spreading out Luna's journal pages. In her paintings, her compositions, even in the garden. Every butterfly was a message, every song a map. But Ryan kept her sedated at Evergreen, used Scarlett to threaten her during visits. The more Luna tried to tell the truth, the crazier she seemed. Sarah's investigative instincts kicked in. The other victims, were they all musicians? All artists of some kind? Ryan chose mothers who could encode messages to their children, then use those same talents to discredit them. Who would believe a painter claiming to see secret symbols? A composer hearing hidden melodies? Henry's monitoring machines beeped steadily, his butterfly birthmark catching the light. James touched it gently, finally understanding its true purpose. It's not just a mark, is it? The pattern, their actual musical notes. Luna's last lullaby, Maria confirmed, split between twins. Henry carries the first half of the melody, Sarah the second. Together they make a song that would lead them to her. That's why they kept Henry away from music, Sarah realized. Why they punished him for playing piano. He could have discovered the truth. And why they targeted me, James added bitterly. A grieving father claiming to see significant birthmarks, searching for stolen children, I played right into their plan to seem delusional. Maria reached into her pocket one last time. There's more. Luna left this for you, James. I was supposed to give it to you when the butterflies came home. It was a small USB drive, labeled simply "When the music returns." Before James could respond, Henry's machines started beeping faster. The boy's eyes flew open wide with recognition as he looked at Sarah. Without speaking, his fingers began tapping out a melody on his blanket. To everyone's amazement, Sarah's hands unconsciously matched his movement, completing the song. Luna's lullaby split between twins, whole again after 8 years. I know where she is, they said in unison. Maria crossed herself. Dios mio. The music, it worked. But James was already reaching for his phone, hope warring with fear. Detective Marshall, we need to move Luna now. Ryan will know the twins have reconnected. He'll try to silence her permanently before she can confirm everything. Through the window, storm clouds gathered. In the garden below, butterfly bushes swayed in the rising wind, nature itself seeming to hold its breath as long-buried truths finally surfaced. Dawn crept into Henry's hospital room, finding James teaching his son to play Luna's lullaby on a small electronic keyboard the music therapist had brought. Henry's fingers, still weak from his illness, moved hesitantly over the keys, but the melody flowed naturally, as if his hands remembered what his mind had forgotten. That's it, James encouraged softly. Let the music guide you. Sarah watched from the doorway, her investigators for softening, as she observed this quiet moment of healing. The matching butterflies on their arms seemed to pulse with each note, a visual harmony to match the audible one. I used to hear this in my dreams, Henry admitted, his voice stronger now after a week of proper care. But Ryan and Scarlett said I was making it up. They said he faltered, years of conditioning making him hesitate. What did they say? Butterfly James prompted gently, using Luna's old endearment. Henry's fingers stilled on the keys. They said I made up the music because I was broken, that nobody would want a broken child who lived in fantasies. Sarah moved into the room then, sitting beside her brother. You know what I think, she said, taking his hand. I think they were scared of the music because it was proof they couldn't break you. No matter what they did, they couldn't erase who you really are. And who am I? Henry whispered, looking between his newfound father and sister with a mixture of hope and fear. You're Henry Rivera, James stated firmly. Son of Luna, the composer who loved you so much she wrote her heart into your skin. Brother of Sarah, who fought for children like you even before she knew she was fighting for family. And my son, who I never stopped searching for. Tears slipped down Henry's cheeks, but he didn't wipe them away. After years of hiding his emotions, he was learning that some tears were healing. Play with me, he asked Sarah hesitantly, scooting over on the bench. She smiled, positioning her hands on the keys. As they played Luna's lullaby together, each twin carrying their part of the melody, the room seemed to fill with something more than music. It was as if every note helped rebuild the bridges Ryan and Scarlett had tried to burn. Maria appeared with breakfast, her eyes glistening as she watched the scene. "Just like your madre," she said softly. "She used to say music builds stronger bridges than words ever could." Henry looked up sharply. "Tell me about her, please. They never let me ask about my real mother." James and Sarah exchanged glances. They'd been careful not to overwhelm Henry with too much information about Luna, letting him set the pace for discoveries. But his direct request felt like another small victory. "Your mother," James began, pulling out an old photo from his wallet, "was the most brilliant musician I've ever known. She could hear melodies in everything: raindrops, butterfly wings, even heartbeats." "When she was pregnant with you both," Maria added, setting down her tray to join them, "she would compose different pieces based on your movements. She said you danced together inside her, creating music only she could hear." Henry traced Luna's face in the photograph. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She looks kind." "She is beautiful," Sarah corrected gently. "And she's fighting her way back to us, just like you fought to survive." The revelation that Luna was alive, but trapped in her own mental prison, had been difficult for Henry to process. But each day, as his strength returned, his questions became bolder. "Do you think," he started, then stopped, gathering courage. "Do you think she'll want me, even after everything?" James felt his heart crack. "Henry, look at me," he waited until his son's eyes met his. "Your mother encoded music into your skin, knowing it might be the only way to find you again. She chose to stay in that hospital, enduring Ryan's threats and Scarlett's torments, because leaving might have meant losing the chance to guide you home. Everything she did, every song she wrote, every butterfly she drew, it was all for you and Sarah. But I'm not. I don't know how to be a proper son. I only know how to clean and stay quiet, and—" Sarah interrupted him by playing the first notes of Luna's lullaby. "Hear how naturally you knew this melody. That's because being her son isn't something you have to learn. It's who you are, who you've always been, even when you had to hide it." Henry's fingers joined hers on the keys, completing the harmony. As the twins played together, James noticed something extraordinary. Their butterfly birthmarks, when caught in the morning light at just the right angle, created a subtle reflection. Combined, the reflections formed a perfect image of Luna's butterfly pendant from the old photograph. "Maria," he breathed, "look." The housekeeper crossed herself. "La mariposa del amor, the butterfly of love. Luna said it would appear when her children found their way home." Henry and Sarah were too absorbed in their music to notice the adult's reaction, but James felt hope surge through him. Luna had known somehow, she had known this day would come. She'd left them not just clues, but beacons of hope, wrapped in melodies and hidden in butterfly wings. As the sun rose higher, its rays catching the twins' matching marks, Henry's playing grew more confident. The boy who had been punished for showing any hint of talent now sat straight back to the keyboard, letting music flow through him like a river breaking through a dam. "Dad," he said suddenly, the word still new on his tongue but growing more natural each time. "When I'm stronger, could we visit Mom?" James wrapped an arm around his son's thin shoulders, including Sarah in his embrace. "As soon as you're ready, Butterfly, we'll help her find her way back to us, just like we found our way back to each other." In that moment, as morning light painted butterfly shadows on the hospital wall, the broken pieces of the Rivera family began to heal, not despite their scars, but because of them. Each crack filled with gold, like the Japanese art of kintsugi, making them stronger and more beautiful for having been broken. As Henry grew stronger, Sarah's investigation into the trafficking network revealed darker truths. In her temporary office at the hospital, walls covered with photos and documents, she briefed James on their latest discoveries while keeping one eye on the security feed from Henry's room. It wasn't just Ryan and Scarlett, she explained, pinning up another photo. They were part of something called the Butterfly Garden, a network specializing in stealing infants from mothers they could discredit. James studied the complex web of connections, all musicians or artists. Creative types who could be easily painted as unstable, Sarah confirmed grimly. They targeted women who encoded messages into art, music, or writing mothers trying to leave breadcrumbs for their stolen children. Then they used those same creative expressions as evidence of mental illness. She pulled out a stack of medical records. Look at the pattern. A composer claims her baby's birthmark contains a hidden melody, paranoid delusions. A painter insists her child's distinctive mark matches a symbol in her art. Visual hallucinations. A writer leaves coded messages in children's stories, dissociative episodes. Like Luna's butterfly music, James murmured. They used her own love against her. But she outsmarted them, Sarah said, a fierce pride in her voice. She knew they'd use her music to discredit her, so she hid her real messages in plain sight. The butterfly birthmarks weren't just identification, they were a key to something bigger. She played a recording from her phone, Luna's lullaby, the same melody the twins had reconstructed. Listen to the mathematical pattern in the notes. It's not just music, it's coordinates. James leaned forward, realization dawning. Coordinates to what? To every butterfly garden safe house where they kept the stolen children. Mom encoded the entire trafficking network into our skin, knowing someday we'd be able to decode it. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. She sacrificed her freedom to give us the tools to bring them down. A soft knock interrupted them. Maria entered, carrying Luna's old journal and a fresh pot of coffee. There's something else you need to see, she said, opening the journal to a marked page. Luna didn't just leave musical clues. She left us a warning. The page contained a series of butterfly drawings, each slightly different. But when Sarah overlaid them with her trafficking network map, they aligned perfectly. Dios mio, Maria whispered. She mapped their entire operation, disguised as art therapy drawings. And Ryan never suspected, James added, because he thought she was too medicated to be coherent. Sarah's phone buzzed an alert from her team. They found another safe house, she reported, scanning the message. 3 more survivors identified, all with distinctive markings. And she paused, color draining from her face. What is it? James demanded. They found records. Videos. Ryan didn't just traffic children, he documented everything. Called it his butterfly collection. He recorded the mother's breakdowns the moment each child was taken. She couldn't continue. James felt sick. He recorded Luna. Sarah nodded mutely, handling him a still from the footage. It showed Luna in the hospital, desperately trying to tell someone about the butterfly marks, while doctors dismissed her as delusional. Ryan could be seen in the background, watching with a slight smile. Her own brother Maria spat. Watching her suffer, treating it like some twisted art project. But why? James asked. Why go to such elaborate lengths? Sarah pulled out one final document, an old newspaper clipping about their grandmother, the original butterfly rescuer. Because Mom wasn't the first musician in the family to use melodies as messages, Grandmother created an underground railroad for trafficked children, using music to guide them to safety. Ryan never forgave her for choosing other children over him. This was his revenge, turning her own methods into a weapon against her daughter. A commotion from the security feed caught their attention. Henry was having a nightmare, thrashing in his hospital bed. James moved to go to him, but Sarah caught his arm. Wait, she said softly. Watch. On screen, Henry's fingers began moving in his sleep, playing Luna's lullaby on imaginary keys. Almost immediately, his distress eased. The music protects him, Maria observed. Even in sleep, he remembers. Not just protects, Sarah corrected. It's connecting him to Luna. Every time the twins play that lullaby, Mom becomes more lucid at Evergreen. The doctors can't explain it, but music builds bridges words cannot. James quoted Luna's favorite saying. She's finding her way back through their melody. Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time, her face showed grim satisfaction. They found Ryan's laptop. Everything's there, records of every child, every mother, every false diagnosis. He documented his own crimes. "Can you trace him?" James asked. Better. Sarah smiled dangerously. "We can predict his next move. The coordinates in Luna's lullaby, they're not just past locations. They're a pattern showing where he'll try to take other children. Mom didn't just leave us a map to the past, she left us a way to stop future trafficking." In Henry's room, the boy had settled, his butterfly birthmark catching the security camera's light. James watched his son sleep, marveling at the strength hidden beneath his fragile exterior. "When do we move?" he asked. "Tonight," Sarah answered. "Teams are in position at every predicted location. But there's something else." She hesitated. "The pattern in Mom's lullaby? It ends at Evergreen, I think. I think she knew Ryan would come for her once we decoded the message." James straightened, years of protective rage crystallizing into determination. "Then we'll be waiting." Maria touched the butterfly drawings in Luna's journal. "La justicia viene en alas de mariposa," she murmured. "Justice comes on butterfly wings." Through the window, storm clouds gathered. In Henry's room, the boy played his mother's lullaby in his sleep, each note a step closer to bringing his family's long nightmare to an end. The butterflies were finally coming home to roost. The threat arrived on pristine hospital stationery, slipped under Henry's door during the brief moment when the security detail changed shifts. The message was simple but chilling. Either return the boy, or Luna learns what really happened the night her mother died. Your choice, brother-in-law. James crumpled the note, his hand shaking. Sarah, reviewing security footage on her laptop, paused at his expression. "They're getting desperate," she observed. "Good." But James wasn't so sure. "Ryan knows something we don't. About your grandmother's death." A death everyone assumed was natural, Maria interrupted, entering with fresh linens. Her face was ashen. "But I found this in Luna's old sheet music." She pulled out a yellowed envelope. She wrote it the day before everything happened. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in Luna's elegant script. "If you're reading this, they've finally made their move. Ryan was there the night Mama died. He watched her play a last warning melody, the one meant to save the next children. I think he recorded it. James, if anything happens to me, protect our butterflies. The music must survive." Henry stirred in his hospital bed, his fingers twitching in that now familiar pattern of his mother's lullaby. The butterfly birthmark seemed darker against his still pale skin, its pattern of hidden musical notes more pronounced. "They're not just after Henry," Sarah realized, scanning the letter. "They want to silence the music completely. Every record, every melody that could expose their network." "And Luna is the key to all of it," James added grimly. "She knows every code, every musical message their mother created." A nurse appeared in the doorway, looking uncertain. "Mr. Rivera, there's a school administrator here about Henry's enrollment." James frowned. They hadn't discussed schooling yet, with Henry still recovering. "I didn't contact any schools." Sarah was already moving, gun drawn. But the administrator had vanished, leaving only a glossy school brochure. On its cover, a familiar butterfly logo. "They're getting closer," Sarah muttered, calling her team. "And bolder." Henry woke fully then, his eyes immediately finding the brochure. Fear flashed across his face. "That's their symbol, the one from the basement door." James and Sarah exchanged sharp looks. "What basement door, butterfly?" Henry's hands twisted in the sheets, where they kept the other kids. "Sometimes at night I'd hear crying. Ryan said it was just the wind, but he trailed off, trembling." Sarah sat beside him, taking his hand. "Henry, this is important. Can you remember anything about those kids? Any details at all?" The boy closed his eyes, concentrating. They all had marks, like mine, different patterns but always hidden, and sometimes late at night I'd hear music, like they were all trying to play the same song but couldn't quite remember it. Other survivors, Sarah breathed. Still out there, still carrying their mother's messages. A commotion erupted in the hallway. Detective Marshall burst in, his usually composed face tight with urgency. "We found Scarlett," he announced, "dead in her apartment. But she left this," he held up a USB drive labeled insurance policy. The video it contained was brutal in its simplicity. Scarlett, clearly recording shortly before her death, spoke directly to camera. Ryan's cleaning house. Anyone who knows about the Butterfly songs has to go. He has Luna's mother's final recording, the one that maps the entire underground network. If Luna ever becomes lucid enough to confirm its meaning. She glanced over her shoulder nervously. He'll kill her, James. And then he'll come for the twins. The music has to die with them. Henry's monitors beeped erratically as fear spiked through him. James moved instantly to his side, humming Luna's lullaby until the boy's heart rate steadied. "He can try," Sarah said, her voice cold. "But he doesn't understand what he's up against." She pulled out her phone, showing them a pattern analysis of Luna's lullaby. Mom didn't just hide coordinates in the music. She hid a warning. These notes, when played together by twins, she looked at Henry. "Want to help me demonstrate, little brother?" Henry nodded hesitantly, accepting the small keyboard James handed him. As the twins played, something extraordinary happened. The combined melody, when run through Sarah's analysis program, revealed a hidden message. The butterfly rises twice. Death brings rebirth. Music remembers. It's not just a song, Maria whispered. It's a prophecy. Detective Marshall's phone buzzed. His face darkened as he read the message. Another nurse at Evergreen was just found dead. And Luna's gone. James felt his heart stop. Gone. Taken, Marshall corrected. But she left this. He held up a piece of paper covered in butterfly drawings. In the center, musical notes formed a pattern identical to the twins' birthmarks. She knew, Sarah realized. She knew he'd come for her once we decoded the lullaby. She wanted him to. Henry's fingers moved over the keyboard, playing a slight variation of their mother's melody. Sarah joined him, their birthmarks seeming to pulse in sync. "Listen," Henry whispered. "Really listen." The new pattern was subtle but clear, a perfect map to their mother's location. "She's leading us to her," James breathed. All this time, every clue, every encoded message, it was never just about finding the children. It was about ending this once and for all. "But it's a trap," Marshall warned. "Ryan wants you to follow." Sarah checked her weapon, her face set with determination. "No," she corrected. "It's not his trap. It's Luna's. She's finally strong enough to face him, and she needs her butterflies to come home." Henry sat straighter in his bed, years of enforced weakness falling away as music and memory flooded back. "When do we go?" James looked at his children, one forged in justice, one tempered by suffering, both carrying their mother's strength in their skin and her music in their souls. "We go tonight," he decided. "It's time to let the butterflies fly free." Outside, storm clouds gathered. The final movement of Luna's symphony was about to begin. The old theater loomed against the stormy sky, its once grand facade now crumbling. The butterfly carvings above the entrance seemed to move in the lightning flashes, their stone wings casting ominous shadows. "Mum's first concert was here," Sarah whispered, checking her weapon, "before Ryan destroyed everything." Henry insisted on coming despite his weakness, leaned against James for support. His fingers traced the piano key pattern carved into the ancient doors. "She's here. I can feel it." Inside, dust-covered instruments littered the stage. A single spotlight illuminated a grand piano, its lid decorated with familiar butterfly motifs. And there, sitting perfectly still at the keys, was Luna. "Welcome home, my butterfly," she said softly, not turning around. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. "You finally learned the melody." Step away from her, James Ryan emerged from the shadows, his face twisted in a mockery of brotherly concern. "She's not well, you know, dangerous delusions about stolen children and musical codes." "The only delusion," Sarah replied coldly, "was believing you'd get away with this." Ryan laughed, the sound echoing through the empty theater. "Get away? Oh, sister dear, I've already won. Every mother broken, every child sold, every musical message corrupted. It's my masterpiece." "You're wrong," Henry's voice, though quiet, carried clearly. "The music survived. In our skin, in our dreams, in our hearts. You couldn't erase it." Luna's hands finally moved, striking a single chord that resonated through the space. The twins' birthmark seemed to pulse with the note. "Mother always loved her music more than me," Ryan spat. "Her precious codes, her secret melodies, saving everyone else's children while I was left alone. So I learned from her, turned her weapons against her own daughter." "She tried to save you too," Luna spoke again, her voice stronger. "The night you killed her, she was playing your salvation. But you chose darkness instead." Lightning flashed, illuminating the theater's butterflies in stark relief. In that moment, Henry broke away from James, moving with unexpected strength toward the piano. "Henry!" No, James started forward, but Sarah held him back. "Wait," she whispered. "Watch." Henry reached the piano, his small hand touching Luna's shoulder. Without a word, she shifted on the bench, making room for her son. Together, their fingers found the keys. The first notes of Luna's lullaby filled the space, but different, now fuller, more complex. Sarah's eyes widened as she recognized the pattern. It's grandmother's last song, the one she tried to play the night she died. Ryan's composure cracked. "Stop that music." But Sarah was already moving to the piano's other side, completing the trilogy. Mother and twins, their butterfly marks glowing softly in the spotlight, wove together the melody that had waited 8 years to be heard. The music built, each note revealing another layer of truth. In the resonating harmonies, years of carefully documented crimes became visible. Hidden frequencies in the melody matched exactly with the trafficking network's communication patterns. Every safe house location, every false identity, every stolen child, all encoded in a symphony of justice. "You see," Luna said calmly, never stopping her playing, "Mother knew what you'd become. She left us the tools to end this, not in violence but in truth, in music." "Truth," Ryan laughed desperately. "Who believed the ravings of a mental patient and her marked children? I own the narrative." "Not anymore," Detective Marshall's voice cut through the darkness as police units flooded the theater. "We've been recording everything. Your confession, the musical evidence, all of it." Ryan's hand moved to his jacket, but Sarah was faster. In one fluid movement, she had him disarmed and pinned. "That's for our grandmother," she said fiercely. "And for every mother you tried to silence." Throughout it all, Luna and Henry continued playing, their hands dancing across the keys in perfect synchronization. The butterfly marks on their arms seemed to shimmer with each harmonic resolution, like wings catching light. "I knew you'd remember," Luna told Henry softly. "Music lives in the blood, in the soul. They could lock me away, drug me into silence, but they couldn't stop the melody from finding you." Henry's tears fell on the keys, but his playing never faltered. "I heard you, Mom. Every night in my dreams, I heard you." As Ryan was led away in handcuffs, still ranting about betrayals and revenge, Luna finally turned to fully face her family. 8 years of enforced fog had lifted from her eyes, leaving them clear and bright with love. "My butterflies," she whispered, opening her arms to both twins, finally free to fly. Henry and Sarah moved into their mother's embrace, while James watched through tears of his own. The butterfly marks on all three seemed to pulse in harmony, completing a visual symphony of reunion. "The other children," Sarah said, suddenly remembering. "The ones with different marks." Luna nodded. "Each mark is a different mother's song. Now that the original melody is recorded, we can decode them all. Find every stolen child, heal every broken family." "But first," James said, finally approaching the piano, "our family needs to heal." Luna looked up at him, love and regret mingling in her gaze. "You never stopped believing. Even when I couldn't remember my own name, I knew someone out there was fighting for our butterflies." Outside, the storm was passing. Through the theater's broken windows, moonlight illuminated the carved butterflies, making them seem to dance. Henry's fingers found the keys again, playing softly. "Can we go home now? All of us." Luna kissed his forehead, then Sarah's before reaching for James's hand. "We are home, butterfly." The music brought us home. As they left the theater, Luna's lullaby seemed to linger in the air, no longer a code to be broken or a secret to be kept, but a simple song of love finally free to be heard. The butterflies had found their way back to the light. At Evergreen Hospital's music therapy room, Luna sat at the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys as if afraid they might burn. After 8 years of medication-induced fog, every sensation felt raw, overwhelming. But the music called, as it always had. Henry and Sarah sat on either side of her, their butterfly birthmarks forming a perfect trio with hers. James stood back, watching this delicate moment of healing unfold. "I'm not sure I remember how," Luna whispered, her hands trembling. The years of enforced silence, of being told her music was merely delusion, had left deep scars. "Your hands remember," Mom, Henry said softly, demonstrating the first notes of her lullaby. "Like mine did, even when I was forbidden to play." Luna touched a single key, the note hanging in the air like a question. Then another and another. Slowly, hesitantly, the melody began to take shape. "That's it," Sarah encouraged. "Let it come back naturally." As Luna played, her movements became more confident. The twins joined in, their 3-part harmony filling the room with the full version of the song that had lived in fragments on their skin. "I used to play this to you both," Luna said, memories surfacing with each note. "Before you were born. I knew Ryan was watching, that he planned to take you, so I encoded everything into the music. The truth about his crimes, the locations of other stolen children, even my own medical records proving I wasn't insane." Her fingers faltered on a particularly complex passage. Henry's small hand covered hers, guiding her through it. "Like this, Mom," he demonstrated. "Remember? It's the part about the butterfly garden." Luna gasped softly as the memory crystallized. "The basement. You were there, weren't you? You heard the other children playing this melody." Henry nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. "I thought I was imagining it. They punished me whenever I tried to play or hum." "Oh, my brave butterfly," Luna pulled him close, while continuing to play with her free hand. "You kept the music alive even when it hurt." Sarah joined the melody at a higher octave, adding the counterpoint that completed the coded message. Every trafficking location, she marveled. Every false identity they used. You hid it all in plain sight, knowing someday we'd be able to decode it. "Music speaks when words are forbidden," Luna quoted, her voice growing stronger. "My mother taught me that before Ryan silenced her." The song shifted, becoming something darker, more urgent. Luna's eyes took on a distant look as another memory surfaced. "I was there that night," she revealed, the music never stopping, "when Ryan confronted our mother about her underground railroad for trafficked children. She tried to play him this melody, the one that would have exposed his early involvement in the trafficking ring. But her hands crashed discordantly on the keys. He stopped the music. James finished quietly, moving to support his wife as she swayed on the bench. "So I hid it," Luna continued, her fingers finding their way back to the melody. "In my art, in my compositions, in my children's skin. Even when they drugged me, even when they made me doubt my own mind, the music stayed safe inside you both." Henry and Sarah exchanged glances over their mother's head, then began playing the complex sequence that had led them to the theater showdown. "We completed the song," Mum Sarah said gently. "Ryan's in custody. The network is exposed. You can play freely now." But Luna shook her head, her tempo increasing slightly. "There's one more melody to unlock, the most important one." Her playing changed, becoming something entirely new yet hauntingly familiar. Henry gasped as his birthmark seemed to tingle in response. "This is grandmother's last song," Luna explained, her hands flying over the keys. "The one she tried to play the night she died. It doesn't just expose trafficking routes, it reveals their entire methodology. How they choose their targets, how they break mothers down, how they hide the children. Everything." The twins joined instinctively, their birthmarks glowing faintly as the three-part harmony filled the room. James watched in amazement as Luna's entire demeanor transformed. Years of trauma and medication-induced confusion fell away, replaced by the passionate musician he'd fallen in love with. "My mother knew Ryan would target me next," Luna continued, the music never faltering. "She knew he'd try to use my own artistry against me. So she left me this song, encoded in a way only another mother would understand." The melody reached its crescendo, all three butterflies pulsing in perfect synchronization. In that moment, Luna seemed to fully awaken, her eyes clearing completely for the first time in 8 years. "I remember everything now," she breathed, looking at her family with pure clarity. "Every detail, every code, every child we still need to save." She turned to James, love and regret mingling in her gaze. "I'm so sorry, my love. I couldn't tell you what was happening. Ryan threatened to kill our butterflies if I did. The only way to protect them was to let myself be labeled insane, to hide the truth in music until they were old enough to understand it." James knelt beside the piano bench, taking her free hand. "You never broke, Luna. You found a way to fight back that they couldn't understand or stop." "And now," Sarah added, her investigator's mind racing ahead, "we can use grandmother's song to find every child they stole, to heal every family they broke." Henry's small fingers continued playing softly as he leaned against his mother. "Can we help the other children learn their songs too, the ones who were forbidden music like me?" Luna kissed his forehead, then Sarah's, her touch full of healing and promise. "Yes, butterfly, that's exactly what we'll do. Music brought our family back together. Now it's time to help other butterflies find their way home." Outside the therapy room window, actual butterflies danced in the garden Luna had once tended. Their wings caught the sunlight, creating patterns that seemed to match the melody still flowing from the piano. The music had finally broken free, and with it, Luna's mind and heart had fully awakened. The healing could truly begin. The courthouse buzzed with tension as the Rivera case prepared to unfold. News cameras lined the steps, reporters vying for position as Sarah's investigation into the butterfly garden trafficking network had become international news. But in a quiet room away from the chaos, a more intimate drama played out. Henry sat at a small piano brought in specially for his testimony, his fingers hovering over the keys as Luna gently guided his hands. "Remember, butterfly," she whispered, "the music tells the truth, even when words fail." The boy nodded, his butterfly birthmark visible beneath his rolled-up sleeve. Gone were the days of hiding it in shame. Now it stood as evidence, a musical testimony encoded in skin. "What if I forget?" Henry's voice trembled slightly. Facing Ryan and Scarlett in court would be his greatest test yet. "You won't," Sarah assured him, her own mark matching his as she sat beside them. "The melody lives in our blood." James watched his family from the doorway, marveling at how far they'd come. Each of them bore scars from the achy and nightmare Luna's battles with enforced medication, Sarah's unknowing search for her own identity, Henry's years of abuse. But here they sat, 3 butterflies ready to take flight. Detective Marshall entered quietly. "It's time. They're bringing Ryan in." The main courtroom fell silent as the Rivera family entered. Ryan, in prison orange, sat with his defense team, his face a mask of calculated innocence. But when Henry walked to the piano instead of the witness stand, that mask slipped slightly. "Objection," Ryan's lawyer stood. "This is highly irregular." Overruled Judge Chen responded firmly. "The court has reviewed the evidence regarding musical encoding. We will hear the witness's testimony in its original form." Henry's hands shook as he positioned them over the keys, but when he began to play Luna's lullaby, his touch was sure. The melody filled the courtroom, each note carrying years of hidden truth. Sarah approached the jury, her investigator's training evident, as she explained, "What you're hearing isn't just music. It's a sophisticated encoding system developed by generations of mothers to protect children from traffickers. Every note corresponds to a location, a date, a victim." As Henry played, prosecutors displayed their evidence. Photos of basement doors with butterfly markers, medical records of drugged mothers, lists of sold children. Each piece matched perfectly with the musical pattern. The circumstantial Ryan's lawyer protested weakly. Luna stood then, moving to join Henry at the piano. Together, mother and son played the full melody, the one she'd hidden in his skin the day he was born. On screens around the courtroom, Sarah's decoding program translated the music into damning evidence: dates, locations, bank accounts, false identities. "My mother created this system," Luna testified, never stopping her playing, to help trafficked children escape. Ryan perverted it, using music to identify artistic mothers he could discredit and steal from. The prosecution presented their masterstroke grandmother's final melody, the one she'd tried to play the night she died, now restored through the combined birthmarks of Luna and her twins. "This proves premeditation," Sarah explained to the stunned courtroom. Years before targeting his sister, Ryan was already involved in trafficking. "Our grandmother discovered this and tried to expose him. That's why he killed her." Ryan's composure finally broke. "She chose them over me," he shouted, rising. "Strange children over her own blood. So I took her precious musical codes and turned them into a symphony of suffering." The outburst sealed his fate. As security restrained him, Henry's playing grew stronger, more confident. Luna and Sarah joined him, their 3-part harmony filling the space with undeniable truth. Judge Chen's verdict was unequivocal: life sentences for Ryan and his entire network. But more importantly, she ordered the creation of a special task force, led by Sarah, to use the musical evidence to locate other stolen children. "The butterfly marks are not just scars," the judge declared. "They are testaments to a mother's love and creativity in the face of unthinkable evil. Let them now serve as keys to healing." After the verdict, in the quiet of the empty courtroom, Henry sat alone at the piano. His fingers found a new melody, not one of hiding or fear, but of freedom. Luna and Sarah joined him, their butterflies seeming to dance in the fading sunlight through the high windows. James approached with the final piece of news. "The adoption papers are approved," he announced quietly. "Not that we needed them, but now it's official in every way," Sarah completed, smiling at her brother. "No one can ever take you away again." Henry's music swelled with joy, the notes climbing higher. Luna wrapped her arms around her son, her own composition joining his. "You know what this means?" she asked softly. "You can go to real school now, take proper music lessons, be a normal child." Normal, Henry tested the word. With a family and everything. With everything, James confirmed, though I'd say our family is rather extraordinarily normal. Maria appeared with a surprise Luna's old butterfly pendant, recovered from evidence. As Luna fastened it around Henry's neck, all 3 birthmarks seemed to glow. For generations, our family has used music to save children, Luna explained. Now it's saved our own? Outside, reporters clamored for statements about the trafficking network's downfall. But inside, a family healed through simple notes and shared melodies. Henry's fingers found the keys one last time, playing the simple lullaby that had started everything. But now it wasn't a code or a cry for help, it was simply a song of love, of family, of butterflies finally free to soar. "Take that," Ryan Sarah murmured, hugging her brother close. "You tried to silence the music, but it only grew stronger." Luna's pendant caught the light, casting butterfly shadows that danced across the keys as her children played. The legal battle was over, but their symphony was just beginning. Justice had come on butterfly wings, carried by a melody of love that no prison could contain. Dear viewers, your presence here means everything to us. These stories of resilience, love, and family healing touch all our hearts. If our tale of the Rivera family's journey moved you, please consider subscribing to our channel. Every subscription helps us continue sharing powerful narratives that remind us of the strength of human spirit and the unbreakable bonds of family. Together we can spread more stories that inspire hope, courage, and understanding. By joining our community, you become part of something meaningful, a space where powerful storytelling connects hearts and changes lives. Thank you for being here, for feeling with us, and for helping these stories reach others who need them. Despite their legal victory, Luna's recovery proved more complex than anyone had anticipated. While her musical abilities returned in full force, other aspects of her mind remained fragmented, like a melody missing crucial notes. In their newly renovated home, where Henry's old piano now sat beside Luna's grand one, these moments of disconnect would surface unexpectedly. She'd be playing beautifully with the twins, then suddenly stop, her eyes growing distant as 8 years of enforced medication took their toll. Mom, Henry would ask softly, his small hand covering hers on the keys. "Where did you go?" Luna would blink, looking at her son with momentary confusion before recognition returned. The music. Sometimes it gets tangled with the memories. The drugs they gave me, they're still there somewhere in my mind, making everything blur. The doctors called it therapeutic-induced trauma. Years of unnecessary medications had created permanent gaps in her cognitive function. While music remained her anchor, daily life became a careful dance around these empty spaces. Sarah struggled, watching her mother's moments of confusion. "It's not fair," she confided to James one evening, after Luna had forgotten her name for the 3rd time that day. "We won. Ryan's in prison. Why does she still have to suffer?" James held his daughter, feeling her frustration. "The mind is like a butterfly's wing," he said, echoing Luna's old wisdom. "Once damaged, it may still fly, but the pattern is forever changed." Henry, however, seemed to understand intuitively how to navigate his mother's altered state. Perhaps his own trauma had taught him the language of broken things. When Luna would get lost in her thoughts, he'd simply start playing their lullaby, letting the music guide her back to presence. "It's okay," Mom, he'd say, making space for her on the bench. "The notes remember even when you don't." But some days were harder than others. Luna would wake screaming from nightmares of Ryan's threats, of children crying in basements, of butterflies being crushed. On these mornings, not even music could fully bring her back. "I should have fought harder," she'd whisper, tracing the butterfly marks on her children's arms. "Should have found another way to protect you both." "You did fight," Sarah would insist, holding her mother close. "You fought with everything you had. You encoded the truth in our skin, in your music, in your art. You never stopped fighting." The doctors suggested more therapy, different medications, but Luna refused anything that might dull her connection to music again. "Better to be broken and feel it," she said firmly, than to be numb and forget. Instead, she poured her lucid moments into helping other trafficking survivors. The butterfly network, once used for harm, was being transformed into a healing system. Luna taught other mothers how to decode the musical messages hidden in their children's marks, turning trauma into testimony. But each session drained her, forcing her to relive her own nightmare. James would find her afterward at the piano, playing fragments of melody over and over, as if trying to stitch her memories back together. "I'm not the mother they deserve," she confessed one night, after struggling to remember basic details about her children's lives. "They need someone whole." James sat beside her, remembering the brilliant musician he'd fallen in love with, seeing both her damage and her determination. "You're exactly the mother they deserve," he assured her, "because you show them that being broken doesn't mean being defeated." Henry, overhearing, came to sit at Luna's other side. Without speaking, he began playing their lullaby, his small fingers strong and sure on the keys. Sarah joined them, completing the harmony. Luna's hands found their place in the melody, muscle memory carrying her through the fog. As they played together, their butterfly marks seemed to pulse in sync, creating patterns of light and shadow on the piano's polished surface. "See," Henry said softly. "The music remembers for all of us." Luna looked at her son, this child who had survived years of abuse yet still played with such gentle grace. At her daughter, who had turned her own trauma into a force for justice. At her husband, who had never stopped believing in their family's song. "Maybe," she whispered, her fingers continuing the melody, "being whole isn't about having no broken pieces. Maybe it's about learning to play beautifully with what remains." Outside their window, real butterflies danced in the garden, their wings catching the light like notes made visible. Luna watched them, these creatures that emerged from darkness transformed, and felt something settle in her fractured mind. She might never fully recover what Ryan's cruelty had taken from her. But here, playing with her children, she could create new patterns from the broken pieces of her past. A different kind of wholeness, written in music and love and the gentle flutter of butterfly wings. Sarah's crisis came quietly, weeks after the trial. Standing in her childhood bedroom, now restored to how it would have been if she'd grown up there, she felt like an imposter in her own life. The walls were painted butterfly blue, covered in musical notes and childhood dreams she'd never gotten to have. A violin case sat in the corner. Luna had mentioned Sarah showing musical aptitude as a baby, just like Henry. "You should have been here," she whispered to her reflection, touching the butterfly mark that had guided her home. Growing up with Mum's music, protecting Henry, being part of this family properly. Instead, she'd been raised by loving adoptive parents who had no idea their daughter was stolen. The Matthewses had given her everything: education, opportunity, unwavering support in her career fighting trafficking. They were good people who had unknowingly benefited from Ryan's crimes. The sound of Henry playing drifted up from downstairs. Her brother's musical gift was undeniable, his connection with Luna almost supernatural in its depth. Sarah's fingers itched to join them, but something held her back. "You don't have to choose," James said softly from the doorway, reading her troubled expression. "Family isn't about erasing the past." "Isn't it?" Sarah turned to face her biological father. "The Matthewses want to see me. They're worried, confused. How do I explain that their beloved daughter is actually a stolen child? That every birthday they celebrated, every milestone they cherished, was built on someone else's pain?" James stepped into the room, taking in the childhood mementos they'd created to fill the 8-year void. "You honor both stories," he said simply. "The family that was taken from you, and the family that unknowingly saved you." But it wasn't that simple. Sarah's adoptive parents had been devastated by the truth, their joy in raising her now tainted by guilt. They sent daily messages expressing remorse, begging forgiveness for not questioning her origins more thoroughly. "They're good people," Sarah said, sinking onto the bed. "They don't deserve to feel like criminals for loving me." Downstairs, Luna's voice joined Henry's playing. their harmony floating up like a question Sarah couldn't answer. How could she merge these two worlds? The accomplished investigator she'd become through the Matthewses' support, and the stolen butterfly finally returned to her musical nest. I feel like I'm betraying someone no matter what I do, she admitted. If I fully embrace being a Rivera, I dishonor the people who raised me. If I maintain my Matthews identity, I'm rejecting Mom and Henry after they waited so long for me. Oh, came Luna's voice as she appeared in the doorway. You're rejecting the false choice Ryan tried to force on all of us. The idea that love must be exclusive to be real. Sarah looked up to find her mother watching her with clear eyes, one of her increasingly precious lucid moments. Henry peeked around Luna's waist, his small face serious. The music sounds better with all the parts, he offered quietly, even the ones that were missing for a while. Luna crossed to sit beside her daughter, taking Sarah's hands in hers. Your adoptive parents gave you something precious, a safe childhood, the strength to become who you are. That's not a betrayal of us. It's a miracle that helped bring our family back together. But they're so hurt, Sarah whispered. They keep apologizing for not knowing. Then we heal that too, Luna said firmly. Invite them here. Let them see that their love for you helped save not just you, but Henry too. Your investigative skills, shaped by their support, brought down the very network that stole you. Henry moved to the violin case, opening it carefully. Maybe he suggested we could all play together? The Matthewses could learn our song too. Sarah felt tears spill over. They're not musical. Music isn't just about playing instruments, Luna reminded her. It's about harmony, about different parts creating something beautiful together. Your adoptive parents are part of your song, Sarah, and therefore part of ours. James watched his daughter absorb this, seeing the weight lift slightly from her shoulders. Family, he added softly, is like a butterfly's migration. Sometimes the path isn't straight, but every stop along the way serves a purpose. Sarah looked around the room again, seeing it differently now, not as a shrine to what was lost, but as a bridge between her worlds. The butterfly mark on her arm seemed to pulse gently, reminding her that some patterns were meant to be complex. So I don't have to choose, she asked, sounding young for the first time since coming home. No, butterfly, Luna assured her, as Henry began playing their lullaby on the violin. You just have to let all the parts of your song exist together. Sarah closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. Perhaps there was room for both families in this melody, all the love, all the loss, all the complicated beauty of finding her way home while honoring the path that led her there. The neighborhood's transformation began with a bouquet of flowers, left anonymously on the Rivera's doorstep. The attached note read simply, "We should have seen. We should have helped. Please forgive us." More followed, letters of apology, offers of support, confessions of willful blindness. The community that had once shunned James as delusional and labeled Henry a troublemaker now grappled with their collective guilt. Mrs. Anderson, who had been among the loudest critics, came in person. She stood in the Rivera's living room, watching Henry play the piano with Luna, tears streaming down her face. I saw the bruises, she admitted, her voice breaking. I heard him crying at night, but it was easier to believe Ryan and Scarlett's lies than to face the truth. How do you forgive something like that? Luna paused her playing, regarding the woman thoughtfully. Forgiveness isn't what we need, she said finally. Action is. Help us protect other children. Learn to see what you once chose to ignore. The local school board convened an emergency meeting, establishing new protocols for identifying abuse. Henry's former teachers struggled with their own culpability, remembering all the signs they'd dismissed. We failed you, his music teacher told him, placing a brand new violin case on the piano bench. But your courage in speaking out will help us protect others. Some community members resisted the change, clinging to their previous narratives. They seemed like such nice people they'd murmur about Ryan and Scarlett. And that boy was always so troubled. Sarah addressed this directly in a community forum. her investigators' authority lending weight to her words. "Abusers count on our preference for comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths," she declared. "They build their power on our willingness to look away." The impact rippled outward. Other families came forward, sharing stories of children with strange birthmarks, of musical talents suppressed, of questions never asked. The Butterfly Network's reach proved vast, threading through countless communities that had chosen silence over action. Local media, once quick to sensationalize James's obsession with finding his son, now ran in-depth pieces on trafficking warning signs. They interviewed Luna about using music therapy to help survivors recover their voices, showing Henry teaching other rescued children to play their own encoded melodies. "Music speaks when words fail," he explained, his quiet wisdom belying his years. "Sometimes you have to listen with more than your ears." The hardest conversations happened at the neighborhood watch meetings, where residents confronted their own role in enabling abuse. James attended one such session, standing before people who had once crossed the street to avoid him. "We're not here to shame anyone," he assured them, though the pain was evident in his voice. "We're here to learn how to be better guardians of our community's children." Detective Marshall implemented new training programs for local law enforcement, using the Rivera case as a study in recognizing subtle signs of trafficking. Officers who had dismissed James's reports years ago now worked to dismantle their own biases. But perhaps the most profound change came in the small, daily interactions. Neighbors who had once hurried past now stopped to listen when Henry practiced, his music floating through open windows. Children who had been warned away from the troubled boy now came for piano lessons, their parents watching in wonder as Luna guided small hands across the keys. Every song has a story, she would tell them, her moments of clarity increasingly frequent as she found purpose in teaching. Every child deserves to have theirs heard. The Butterfly Garden, once Luna's private sanctuary, was restored and expanded. Community members contributed plants, creating a living memorial to survivors of trafficking. Each new butterfly that visited seemed to carry a message of transformation. Yet challenges remained. Some wounds were too deep for simple apologies to heal. Henry still flinched sometimes when adults raised their voices. Luna had days when the past clouded her present. Sarah struggled to reconcile her dual identity in a community that had wronged both sides of her family. Change is like music, James observed one evening, watching fireflies dance like musical notes in their garden. It happens note by note, measure by measure. Sometimes there's dissonance before harmony. The neighborhood children, less burdened by adult guilt, led the way in healing. They created a butterfly choir, learning Luna's lullaby as a song of hope and vigilance. Their clear voices carried the melody that had once been hidden, transforming a code of survival into an anthem of protection. Mrs. Anderson organized a committee to support other families recovering from trafficking, turning her shame into action. The school established a music therapy program with Luna and Henry as special consultants. Even the local police station installed a piano in its lobby, a reminder of the power of listening deeply. "We can't change what happened," Luna told the community at the Butterfly Garden's dedication ceremony. "But we can change what happens next." Henry played at that ceremony, his music strong and clear in the autumn air. As butterflies danced around him, drawn to the garden's new blooms, the gathered neighbors finally truly listened not just to the notes, but to the story of survival, resilience, and transformation they carried. The community's healing, like the butterfly's metamorphosis, would take time. But with each new day, each small act of awareness and amends, they moved closer to becoming the protectors they should have been all along. After all, as Luna often said, even the smallest butterfly's wings can change the direction of the wind. In the depths of the old theater's basement, Sarah's investigation team made their final discovery. Behind a hidden panel marked with a faded butterfly, They found Ryan's complete archives, decades of meticulously documented crimes that revealed an even darker truth than anyone had suspected. "Dad," Sarah called, her voice shaking as she examined the files. "You need to see this." James arrived to find his daughter surrounded by photographs, medical records, and most disturbing of all, a series of musical scores. Each page was annotated in Ryan's precise handwriting, detailing how he had systematically corrupted their mother's rescue system. He didn't just target Luna, Sarah explained, spreading out the evidence. He spent years studying how grandmother helped trafficking victims escape. Every musical code, every butterfly mark, every safe house location, he learned it all so he could reverse engineer it for trafficking instead of rescue. The photographs told a devastating story: their grandmother, young and determined, teaching musical codes to rescued children. Ryan watching from the shadows, taking notes, the gradual transformation of salvation into exploitation. But why, James wondered, picking up a particularly haunting image of Ryan photographing his own mother's murder. Why document his own crimes so thoroughly? Because it was never just about profit. Luna's voice came from the doorway. She stood there with Henry, both their butterfly marks seeming to pulse in the dim light. It was about proving he could corrupt something pure, turn our family's legacy of rescue into a weapon. Henry moved to the piano in the corner, his small fingers finding keys that hadn't been touched in years. The melody he played matched exactly with the sheet music in Sarah's hands, but where Ryan had noted it as a submission sequence, the original score revealed it was meant to signal freedom. He took grandmother's hope and twisted it. Luna continued, joining her son at the piano. Every song she wrote to guide children home, he repurposed to imprison them. Every butterfly mark meant to identify rescuers became a brand of ownership. Sarah's team brought in more evidence, ledgers showing hundreds of children sold, recordings of mothers being systematically discredited, detailed analyses of how to break artistic spirits. But most chilling were Ryan's personal journals, revealing an obsession that spanned generations. "Listen to this," Sarah read, her voice tight with anger. "Mother thought her precious music could save everyone else's children. Now I use it to ensure no child escapes. Every butterfly she releases I recapture. Every song of freedom becomes a chain." James watched his wife and son playing together, their matching marks catching the light. But he failed, he realized. The music was stronger than his hatred. Luna nodded, never stopping her playing. He could corrupt the system, but not the soul of it. The truth stayed alive in our DNA, in our children's instincts, in the very marks he tried to use against us. Henry's playing grew stronger, more confident. "That's why they punished me whenever I tried to make music," he said softly. "They knew I was remembering something they couldn't erase." Detective Marshall arrived with the final piece of evidence, a recording from the night of the grandmother's murder. In it, she played one last melody while confronting Ryan about discovering his trafficking involvement. Her final words were clear: "You can silence me, but the music will survive." Every butterfly carries a piece of the truth. She knew Sarah breathed. She knew he would target Luna next, so she encoded everything into that last song. The same notes that became our birthmarks. Luna's hands moved instinctively through the melody her mother had died protecting. She gave her life to ensure the truth would survive in her grandchildren's skin. Ryan thought he was destroying her legacy, but he was actually ensuring it would survive through you both. The team continued cataloging evidence, but James's attention was on his family at the piano. 3 generations of musical code, of butterfly messages, of love stronger than hatred, all contained in the simple beauty of their playing together. "What happens now?" Henry asked, his fingers never faltering on the keys. Sarah squared her shoulders, every inch the determined investigator. "Now we use Ryan's own records to find every child he stole, every mother he silenced. His documentation of corruption becomes our roadmap to healing." And the music Henry pressed, looking up at Luna. His mother smiled, her clarity stronger than ever in this moment of truth. The music goes back to what it was always meant to be, a guide home for lost butterflies. As if in response, their 3 birthmarks seem to glow stronger, the hidden notes in their pattern singing a song of justice finally served, of truth finally heard, of family legacy restored to its original purpose of hope and rescue. The final truth was written in butterfly wings and piano keys. Love's melody could never truly be corrupted, only temporarily disguised until the right hearts remembered how to play it. The day they moved Luna home from Evergreen marked more than just a physical relocation. In the Rivera Mansion's music room, now restored to its former glory, an extraordinary reunion was unfolding. 15 children, each bearing distinctive birthmarks, gathered around the grand piano with their newly found mothers. These were the first survivors identified through Ryan's records, their musical codes finally decoded. Henry sat at the piano, his small hands guiding theirs as they rediscovered their birth mother's melodies. Like this, he demonstrated gently to a girl about his age, her dragonfly mark visible on her wrist. The music remembers even when we forget. Luna moved among them, her clarity strongest when helping others heal. Each mark tells your story, she explained, showing mothers how to read the musical patterns hidden in their children's skin. Your love was so strong you wrote it into their very being. Sarah coordinated with social workers and therapists, ensuring each reunion had proper support. The process of reconnecting was delicate, complicated by years of separation and trauma. But when each mother-child pair found their shared melody, something magical happened. "It's like watching butterflies emerge," James observed softly to Maria, who was distributing tea and tissues to overwhelmed parents, each one finding their wings in their own time. The Matthews arrived during this scene, pausing uncertainly in the doorway. Sarah's adoptive parents had struggled with their role in this expanded family, but Luna had been insistent on including them. "Come in," she called warmly, making space at the piano. Every note adds to the harmony. Mrs. Matthews moved forward hesitantly, her eyes fixed on Sarah. "We don't know anything about music." "But you know about love," Luna replied simply. "You kept our daughter safe when we couldn't. That makes you part of our song." Henry started playing their family lullaby, and Sarah joined in, creating space between them for both sets of parents to sit. The Matthews watched in wonder as their daughter's butterfly mark seemed to dance with the music. "We always wondered about that mark," Mr. Matthews admitted. "The adoption agency said it was a lucky sign." It was, Luna assured them. It led her home to all of us. Other families were having similar moments of healing. A mother who hadn't seen her son since his birth wept as he played the lullaby she'd composed while pregnant. A teenager with a songbird mark discovered she shared her birth mother's perfect pitch. Each reunion added another layer to the symphony filling the house. Maria appeared with Luna's old journals, now serving as guides for other mothers learning to decode their children's marks. "La musica del corazón," she said softly. "The heart's music never truly dies." The Matthews gradually relaxed as they watched Sarah move between both her mothers, helping new families decode their own musical messages. They began to understand that love didn't have to be divided to be multiplied. "Your daughter," Mrs. Matthews said to Luna, "saved our family too, by showing us that truth and love can coexist." Luna took her hand warmly. "Our daughter," she corrected. "She carries both our songs in her heart." Henry continued playing, his music providing a foundation for each new family's discovery. The boy who had once been forbidden to touch a piano now served as a bridge for others finding their way home. Sometimes, he told a younger child struggling with conflicting loyalties, family is like a big orchestra. Different instruments, different melodies, but all part of the same song. James watched his son with pride, seeing how Henry's own trauma had transformed into wisdom beyond his years. The boy who had been broken was now helping others heal. As evening fell, the gathered families shared a meal together, birth parents, adoptive parents, lost children, and found siblings all breaking bread as one extended symphony of love. The Matthews sat between Luna and James, no longer uncertain of their place in this expanding circle. "To all our butterflies," Luna toasted, her voice strong and clear. "Those who were lost and found, those still searching, and those who helped us fly home." Sarah hugged both her mothers, while Henry played softly in the background. The butterfly marks around the room seemed to pulse in harmony, each telling its own story of loss, love, and reunion. The greatest victory, James reflected, watching his expanded family, isn't just finding each other again. It's learning how to create new music from all our broken pieces. As stars appeared outside, the mansion filled with a symphony of healing different melodies weaving together, creating something stronger and more beautiful than any single song could be. The butterflies had not just come home, they had built a bigger nest for all to share. In the courthouse's final hearing, justice wore butterfly wings. The full scope of Ryan's network had been exposed, leading to hundreds of arrests across multiple countries. But today's proceeding was more intimate, the official recognition of every recovered child's true identity. Henry sat between Luna and James, watching as Sarah presented the evidence that would restore his legal name to Henry Rivera. His butterfly mark seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights as Judge Chen reviewed the documents. In light of the extraordinary circumstances, the judge announced, "This court recognizes not only the legal restoration of these children to their birth families, but also acknowledges the complex bonds formed during their separation." She looked directly at the Matthews, who sat supportively behind Sarah. "Love is not a zero-sum game. These children deserve the richness of all who have cared for them." The proceedings continued, each family's story adding to the larger narrative of healing. But it was Henry's testimony that brought the courthouse to silence. Standing at a small keyboard instead of the witness stand, he began to play. The melody started as Luna's lullaby, but evolved into something more, a symphony of survival incorporating fragments from every recovered child's musical code. "The music tells our story," he explained, his young voice steady. "Not just of what was taken, but of what survived, what we're building now." Sarah presented the final evidence, a comprehensive database matching musical codes with DNA records, ensuring no trafficking victim would ever again go unidentified. The butterfly marks, once used to brand stolen children, now served as keys to their liberation. "From this day forward," Judge Chen declared, "these musical markers will be recognized as legal proof of identity, equal to DNA evidence. What was meant to cage these children has become their wings of freedom." Luna rose to address the court, her clarity sharp in this crucial moment. "Our mother created this system to guide lost children home," she stated. "My brother tried to corrupt it, but he failed. The music remembered its true purpose." The judge signed the final orders, hundreds of them, each representing a family restored. But she added an unprecedented addendum: legal recognition of the expanded family bonds formed through trauma and healing. "These children belong not just to their birth parents," she explained, "but to all who helped them survive and find their way home. Their stories are a testament to love's ability to transcend biological boundaries." Outside the courthouse, butterflies filled the air, released by survivors in celebration of their freedom. The Matthews stood with the Riveras, no longer uncertain of their place in this expanding circle of healing. Henry played one final piece, the complete version of his grandmother's last song, now fully decoded. As the notes filled the air, butterfly marks around the plaza seemed to pulse in harmony, each telling its own story of loss and redemption. "The resolution isn't just legal," Sarah observed, watching families embrace across once rigid boundaries. "It's spiritual. We're all transformed by this journey." Detective Marshall approached with news from the ongoing investigation. Ryan's international contacts are falling like dominoes. Every musical code is leading us to more survivors. The butterfly effect in action. Luna smiled, watching Henry play. "My mother always said music builds bridges words cannot." Now those bridges are helping others find their way home. But the Matthews had prepared a surprise. They'd learned the basic melody of Luna's lullaby, their way of embracing both sides of Sarah's heritage. As they played their simple version, Sarah's eyes filled with tears of joy. "See," Henry said wisely, "the song is better with all the parts." James watched his expanded family, birth parents and adoptive parents, lost children and found siblings, all adding their own notes to this symphony of healing. The butterfly marks that had once branded them as stolen now shimmered like badges of survival. The resolution isn't an ending, he reflected. It's a beginning, each family learning to create new music from their broken pieces. Luna gathered both her children close, their butterfly marks forming a perfect trinity. "The truth couldn't stay buried," she said softly. "Love's melody always finds a way to be heard." As twilight fell, the courthouse plaza filled with music, hundreds of survivors playing their unique codes, weaving together a tapestry of sound that spoke of loss, love, and triumph. The butterflies danced in the fading light, their wings catching the last rays of sun like notes made visible. Henry's fingers found the final chord of his grandmother's song, letting it ring out across the gathered families. In that moment, all the butterfly marks seemed to pulse as one, a visual harmony matching the audible one. "What happens now?" he asked, looking up at his parents. Luna touched his butterfly mark gently. "Now we help others remember their songs. The music didn't just save us, it gave us a purpose." Sarah nodded, her investigator's badge catching the light like another kind of butterfly. Every mark tells a story. Every story leads to another child. The work continues. But this time, James added, embracing his expanded family, "We fly together." As night fell, the music continued, a symphony of healing. A family found and expanded, of butterflies finally free to soar. The resolution wasn't just about justice served or identities restored. It was about love's ability to create harmony from discord, to build family beyond blood, to transform wounds into wings. The butterfly effect had come full circle, turning a legacy of pain into an inheritance of hope. 1 year after the trial, the Rivera mansion buzzed with a different kind of music. Henry's 9th birthday celebration filled every room with joy and melody, a stark contrast to his previous years of hidden suffering. Children from the survivor support group he'd helped establish played tag in the garden, their various birthmarks butterflies, songbirds, dragonflies no longer hidden but displayed proudly like badges of honor. Each mark told a story of loss and recovery, each child a testament to the healing power of music and love. "Watch this," Mum Henry called from the piano, where he was teaching younger survivors a simplified version of their freedom song. Luna beamed with pride, her moments of confusion now rare enough to be manageable. The Matthews sat with James and Luna, their initial awkwardness replaced by genuine warmth. They'd become regular fixtures at family gatherings, embracing their role as extended family rather than competing for Sarah's affection. "He's a natural teacher," Mrs. Matthews observed, watching Henry guide tiny hands across the keys. "He knows what it means to find your way home through music," Luna replied softly. "They all do." Sarah arrived late, still in her investigator's uniform but carrying her violin case. The international task force she led had just rescued another group of marked children, using the musical codes to track trafficking routes. "Perfect timing," James smiled as she unpacked her instrument. "Henry's been waiting for your duet." The birthday concert had become a new tradition, each survivor playing their unique melody, weaving together a symphony of healing. Henry and Sarah performed their mother's lullaby, their butterfly marks seeming to dance in the afternoon light. Maria moved through the crowd with refreshments, pausing to cross herself each time she passed Luna's old butterfly pendant, now framed alongside photographs of every rescued child. "La mariposa renace," she murmured. "The butterfly is reborn." The garden had been transformed too, designed specifically to attract butterflies and provide a peaceful space for therapy sessions. Survivors and their families could often be found there, using music and nature to rebuild broken bonds. As twilight approached, Henry gathered everyone for the birthday ceremony he'd invented, releasing newly hatched butterflies while playing their freedom song. Each child took turns at the piano, adding their own notes to the melody. Remember, he told them, wisdom beyond his years, shining in his eyes, the music lives in all of us. Even when we forget, our marks remember. Luna watched her son, tears of joy replacing the old tears of loss. The boy who had once been forbidden to touch a piano now led others to healing through music. New beginnings, she whispered to James, are just beautiful endings in disguise. The butterflies took flight as the last notes faded, their wings catching the setting sun like musical notes made visible. In this moment, surrounded by family both blood and chosen, the Rivera legacy of rescue and healing lived on. Henry's 9th birthday wasn't just a celebration of his survival. It was a testament to love's ability to transform trauma into triumph, to turn wounds into wings, to create symphony from silence. The music played on, and the butterflies danced freely under the evening sky. The Rivera Foundation became a beacon of hope for trafficking survivors worldwide. Housed in the renovated theater where the final confrontation had taken place, its butterfly logo symbolized transformation through music and love. Sarah directed the investigative branch, using her unique perspective as both survivor and rescuer to revolutionize trafficking prevention. Her team employed the musical codes not just to find victims, but to identify potential trafficking attempts before children could be taken. Every mark tells a story, she would explain at international conferences. But more importantly, every story can prevent another tragedy. Henry, despite his youth, became the heart of the Foundation's healing program. His music therapy sessions drew survivors from around the world, each carrying their own encoded marks, each finding their way home through melody. The music remembers, he would tell them, guiding their hands to piano keys. Even when we forget, our bodies remember the songs our mothers gave us. Luna divided her time between teaching at the Foundation and composing new protective melodies. Her moments of confusion became rarer as she found purpose in transforming her mother's rescue system for a new generation. We're not just healing past wounds, she explained to new mothers, learning to encode messages into art. We're building a future where children can't be silenced. The Matthews threw themselves into supporting work, establishing a legal aid program for adoptive families discovering their children had been trafficked. Their dedication to healing both sides of broken families inspired others to bridge similar divides. James managed the Foundation's expanding reach, ensuring every survivor had access to both practical and emotional support. The Butterfly Garden grew into a healing center, where families could reconnect through music and nature. The impact rippled outward. Police departments worldwide adopted musical coding analysis in trafficking cases. Hospitals implemented butterfly mark documentation protocols. Schools developed programs to identify and protect at-risk artistic children. Maria's role evolved from housekeeper to historian, documenting every success story in journals that mirrored Luna's old coded diaries. Each entry celebrated not just rescue, but renewal. Las mariposas nunca olvidan el camino a casa, she would say. Butterflies never forget the way home. More survivors came forward, drawn by the Foundation's message of healing through music. Each new mark decoded led to more children found, more families restored, more wounds transformed into wings. The community that had once shunned the Riveras now rallied around their mission. Local music schools offered scholarships to survivors. Business leaders funded expansion projects. Artists contributed their talents to healing programs. Henry's simple birthday tradition of releasing butterflies while playing freedom songs became an annual Foundation event, drawing thousands. Each year, the symphony grew stronger as more survivors added their voices to the healing chorus. But perhaps the most profound impact was invisible to outsiders, the quiet moments when a lost child found their way home through a half-remembered melody, when a mother's coded love finally reached its destination, when trauma transformed into triumph through the power of music. The butterfly effect had come full circle, turning one family's healing into a worldwide movement of hope and restoration. The Foundation's motto, written in musical notes around a butterfly emblem, said it all: every mark a message, every song a way home. As twilight painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, the Rivera Mansion's music room held one last performance of the day. Henry sat at the grand piano, Luna beside him, their matching butterfly marks catching the fading light. Sarah stood ready with her violin, while James and the Matthews watched from comfortable chairs. "Play it again," Henry asked softly, "the whole story from the beginning." Luna smiled, placing her hands on the keys. "From darkness to light, butterfly, just like we practiced." The music began quietly, echoing the fear and loneliness of their separated years. Henry's part carried the weight of his hidden suffering, while Sarah's violin wove through the melody like a searching heart. Luna's accompaniment spoke of a mother's endless love, waiting to be remembered. As the piece progressed, the harmonies grew stronger. The moment of recognition, the family's reunion, the triumph over darkness, all captured in swelling notes that filled the room with color and light. Through the open windows, real butterflies danced in the garden, attracted by the flowers Luna had planted for healing. Their wings caught the last rays of sun, creating patterns that matched the musical notes floating through the air. "Look," Henry whispered, never missing a beat. "They're dancing to our song." Maria appeared silently with tea and cookies, pausing to cross herself as the music reached the part about justice and redemption. The butterfly marks on the three musicians seemed to pulse with each meaningful phrase. Mrs. Matthews wiped away tears as Sarah's violin soared through the passage about found family and expanded love. Her husband squeezed her hand, both of them finally at peace with their place in this extraordinary symphony. James watched his family create magic together, marveling at how suffering had been transformed into such beauty. The boy who once cleaned in fearful silence now played with confident joy. The woman who had been drugged into confusion now composed with crystal clarity. The daughter who had unknowingly searched for her own story now helped others find theirs. As the piece neared its end, Luna added a new section they'd never played before. Henry and Sarah followed instinctively, their marks glowing brighter as the fresh melody spoke of future hope and endless possibility. "The story isn't over," Luna explained, as the final notes hung in the air. "It keeps growing, like rings in water, when a butterfly touches the surface." "Or like love," Henry added, wise beyond his years, "when it finally finds its way home." Outside, the first stars appeared, twinkling like musical notes in the darkening sky. The garden's butterflies settled among Luna's flowers, their wings folding like gentle punctuation marks in nature's symphony. Sarah tucked her violin away, coming to sit between her two sets of parents. Henry leaned against Luna, his small fingers still tracing gentle patterns on the keys. James stood by the window, watching night fall on their transformed world. The music had done more than bring them home. It had taught them that every ending was just a prelude to something new. Every scar could become a song, and love's melody played on forever in the flutter of butterfly wings. Again, Henry asked hopefully. Again, they all agreed, as the first notes of their family symphony filled the peaceful night. This emotional story of family, healing, and the unbreakable bonds of love deserves your support, doesn't it? Please take a moment to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with your loved ones. Don't forget to share your own thoughts and what this story taught you in the comments below. Our team extends our deepest gratitude to all our viewers for your continuous support and dedication to these meaningful narratives.